Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Alathrix, and of course, welcome back to the Adventure Mode. In today's video, we have one very simple goal, and that is to find a blue portal, go through it, and then start creating the final form of this craft. So, really isn't all that simple, but it's a very straightforward goal anyway. This is going to be a lot of building, and most likely this craft is going to go through a lot of changes very, very quickly. I don't want it to be focused on flying as much as it currently is. I think this is the extreme level of flying I would like to allow it. I would like it still to be able to fly somewhat, perhaps to pounce on enemies or to avoid the water, but I think its status and its ability to use its hydrofoils as a water skimmer will be its main two abilities. So underwater whilst the water is rough, and then above the water whilst it's nice and smooth like this, flying occasionally, but mostly just to get to the enemy quickly during a fight. And I have a few ideas how to accomplish that without, well, setting up a control and PID system to allow it sustain flight like currently. I'm using it now because this is the last chance. Also, what was that weird graphical glitch then? Everything went dark for a brief second. Well, I'm going mad. Also, being able to get some time to just build and not really rush about things means we can get the missiles set up correctly for once. At the moment, with these missiles, for instance, they definitely have too much fuel. They simply fade out from existence before all the fuel is used up. This means we should either make them faster to use the fuel less efficiently and just get more distance, or we can add the, what's it called? There is the modulator, or whatever it's called, which will allow it to exist for longer. It's a block I almost never use and really should. Where are you? I am absolutely blind and probably looking right at it right now. There we are, the regulator. Each regulator extends the missile's lifetime by 100% of the default. Even just one of these would massively increase the range of these missiles. So, I'll be right back once we've found a blue portal. We found loads in the previous video when I was ignoring them, so naturally now I can't find a single one. Finally, we have gone through a blue portal. You can probably tell by the amount of red portals all around us right now. Once we leave this area, the difficulty is going to spike greatly. So, I'm removing the wings. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Well, the second thing, I've already removed the very front. As much as I loved the broom wall thing at the front, the problem was the amount of drag it was causing was making using the ship and doing anything with it an absolute chore. It was fun, but we can have other melee capabilities. We just don't need the Wall of Death. As much as it was very effective. I mean, it did kill a white flyer ship one-on-one, which was pretty darn lovely. I will still keep some wings as well on the inside, but I don't want this much in terms of lift. Once again, I don't want this to be a craft which is primarily a flyer. It's so difficult though, because making things fly in this game, once you get the hang of it, isn't particularly difficult, and flying is really, really good for the adventure mode. So even slight flight capability is annoyingly effective. Okay, now, if I keep on destroying stuff, it'll be fine, even if we don't have the storage, because it will be still on the map, I believe. So, it's okay if we destroy some of our storages. What to destroy next? What I could do... Okay, so, a bit controversial here, but I could go into the Sandbox Mode to finish off this craft, because right now we are essentially in a pocket sandbox dimension. There is nothing different here to the regular Sandbox Mode, except for the fact I can't lift this out of the water. That's the only difference. So I could just go into Sandbox Mode, and then we could retrofit this later. Actually, can you even retrofit things here? You can, but I don't know how it works. You know what, just in case, I'll just stay here. And that way I can say I haven't used the Sandbox Mode as well, which is a nice thing to be able to say. So here's something to note. I still consider myself to be on the bottom rung of mediocre when it comes to building. I'm somewhere in the middle, I think. Lower middle, because I've seen some of the things you can make in From the Depths, and I am nowhere near them yet. But even I am getting annoyed by how I've created some of this craft. Obviously, it's because I was speed building. Efficiency is difficult when you don't have time to keep on rebuilding and checking things, especially for a slow build like me by nature, but even so. Large chunks of this craft are gonna have to be removed. Now, I do want to keep this core section here, because it is very iconic of the ship itself. Oh god, this thing's gonna start just sinking, isn't it? Okay, really weird thing I'm gonna do now, just to make sure we don't just sink to the bottom of the ocean, because that'd be really annoying. Where are the thrusters on? Oh, yeah, the PID's still set to flight mode. Okay, that's something which will be changed as I add new PIDs. What I'm going to do, just so this thing doesn't sink to the bottom of the ocean, which will be really, really annoying, is I'm going to quickly put down this. And I can extend this as far as I need to. Just some wooden blocks, just to keep it floating as I keep on removing things. Well, this is going to give it more than enough room for weapons. Can extend the sides to follow suit. We'll add some middle sections to make it look a bit more, well, just not a straight line, because that's really boring. Try to make the hull a bit less pointy than before as well, because before it was, well, once again, a door wedge. A door stopper. A door boy. What did you just say about making it too pointy, Lathrix? Like, a second ago. Oh, I don't care, I like pointy hulls. You know what? It's me. I like pointy things. They're sharper and cause more damage. I'm still in a mildly sadistic mood at the moment. I believe it's fairly obvious that I just destroyed a hull. So despite the fact I do want this to be less spiky, at the same time, I just like spiky hulls. I don't know what it is, but pointy hulls to me just seem right in this game. I just tried to build something which looked more realistic. I even used, oh, there we are, a reference picture and everything, and I just didn't like it. And in the end, it's my insane build of insanity, so if I want my insane build of insanity to have a spiky front, then it can have a spiky front if it wants. Though to be fair, we are going to add some melee abilities to it anyway, so that is something to consider. I'm not really going to have a proper front still, just more aerodynamic than before. What I'm thinking is, and of course more hydrodynamic, what I'm thinking is what we could have is a spin block kind of held in the front, because that would look pretty cool. Rather than having it like as its own section, just have it slightly under the hull so it sticks out. Then armor up the back of it. It still affects our drag, but nowhere near as much as that previous build. Here's a simple concept. What about a weapon which is more aimed at holding the enemy in place, rather than doing all that much damage? So this is obviously a really simple version of what we could do, but just some hidden spin blocks within the craft. They go forwards, and they grab the target as much as possible. Now, of course, they likely won't get all the way here, but they will do damage and stick into the enemy. The enemy then are simply stuck. When combat's over, that will return back into the craft. So you can't normally see it, it doesn't really affect the overall drag of the craft, and we can build over and under it nice and easily. Just as an idea. A lot of people mention that I make my crafts way too spiky, way too sharp at the front. It's not really how ships look in real life, and honestly, there's good reason for it. And I keep on trying to avoid it, but I've came to a conclusion. I really like how that looks. I like the overly spiky, silly nature of it. So I'm just gonna keep building like it, because it's what I really, really enjoy. And you know what? It just looks like it's gonna hurt something, and that makes me, at the moment, incredibly happy. Now I'm tempted to actually be really weird with this front of hull and have a sort of secondary section and third section here, all in a similar vein of this, sort of coming out of the hull, looking all pointy and nasty and stuff. That would make building the hull way more difficult. And I don't have all the time in the day today, sadly. That and my mind is slowly breaking. This is going to be one oversized hull. But on the upside, on the old design, it's more built for the future, so as we keep on upgrading it, we're going to have plenty and plenty of space. Also, I have no idea what's going on with these metal rings I'm adding to the front, but I really like how that looks. I still want it to look like it was once a normal hull, then it was horribly, horribly mutilated and converted. In a friendly, happy, non-painful way, of course. Maybe a bit odd, but I actually really, really love how this looks. It's like framing each section of hull, and I really, really like that. I'll also use some different paints as well to make it stand out more very soon. It just occurred to me what we're doing to the new ship is exactly what we did to the old ship. We're encasing it in another ship. Every time this gets bigger, it's not really adding to the original, it's just encasing it further. So in the very core of this, we still have our heartstone and everything from the original little ship. In fact, look, we still have a little bit of the superstructure here. Then we have the second ship, and then the third ship is now growing around that. Once you are part of the Lathrixian Legion, you may never leave. You're just encased in more. Angles are looking really weird down here, and that's because I'm using different slopes at the top, which I'm building from. Now, this is a really easy fix. If I wanted to fix this, I would just change them all to the same angle. So all the slopes would all be 3 or 4 or what have you, and then each of these would run next to each other perfectly. But I kind of like it, honestly, how weird that looks. I don't think it'll look too bad when it's finished either, so yeah, I'm going to keep that. Because once again, it kind of breaks up the pattern a little bit for me. And today, I'm building just how I want to build. Now, in the future, I will be trying to go with more traditional building methods and such, trying to improve myself in that way, but for today, we're building Lathrixian. Also, what's with the weird lighting at the moment? That is getting really irritating. Since we're still trying to keep at least some of the original style of the craft, I have gone with this all the way back. Now, if you look at my earlier ships, things like the Plague Guard and such, I do avoid all of this because it does cause a problem with the center. It looks really weird. And actually trying to have the center where this looks like the center should be would make this craft absolutely massive. It's going to be big, but not that big. So yeah, it's gonna look weird, but I'm trying to keep it like it looked originally when it was the doorstop, because that was the original main craft, really. The first little runaway craft was more just a very brief larval stage. So now the middle is more here, and in fact we could bring that even further forward. So when I do eventually add the bridge, which is the last thing I'm going to add at the moment, since I do also need to add all the functional components, and this is going to have a lot of space for functional components. The middle can be here, so we can build the bridge accordingly, based around where the middle of the craft is. Still looks a bit surfboard-like, but yeah, that is just going to happen, like, really, if I try and go with this style. So I've been thinking, what type of weapons are we actually going to use on this, and is ramming still going to be a possibility when we're using such a large vehicle? Well, clearly, because it is quite thin with how long it is, what we could do is build this into a true broadsiding craft, having cram turrets all the way, mortars perhaps in places, and this could probably obliterate small to medium targets in seconds, and even stand toe-to-toe with larger enemy vehicles, especially just because of sheer mass. But then we lose the ramming capability completely, and that's kind of sad, so I don't know what to do there, so I have a feeling like I'm not going to be finishing it in this video, but I'm just going to finish all the basics, you know, add the new engine, finish the hull, start separating it into pieces, and then in the next video, we'll make it a final thing. I still want it to be able to fly. Bear in mind, this is just the basic hull. I'm still going to be attaching loads of stuff to it. I still want it to be able to be a water skimmer, and I still want it to be able to go underwater at a whim and stay as a true submarine. So it still needs to do all those things. It's just its melee capability. I am starting to think that perhaps it might be best to say goodbye to those days and go purely into the destruction of enemies. Probably still with lots of EMP. I am looking forward to using EMP mortars, because that just sounds weird. So another reason why I'm building the hull mostly out of wood right now is purely because I don't know if I've got enough resources to build everything I want, and what I can do later on is convert all of the wood quite easily into metal. So, do I have enough resources? Well, let the conversion work begin. Wow, that looks bizarre at the back, and I kind of like it. That's going to be mostly flat now at the very back, so I can add all the propulsion I want. Also, to prove how important drag is, right now this is mostly hydrodynamic. Mostly. It's going at almost the same speed, despite the fact I've removed all the hydrofoils, and I've removed most of the movement. I've even removed the internal Deady Blade, and we're already going 20 meters per second. We're heavier, because I checked the volume and everything, and we have less propulsion. Well, maybe not heavier because the front was incredibly heavy, but the point is drag is so important, and that block at the front was an utter nightmare. We can make this go very fast even whilst it's just acting like a normal ship, which it won't do most of the time. It's going to be, hopefully, a water skimmer still. Just trying to think of how I'm going to do it. This is the basic hull, then we can start mutating it. So I think this will be the final shape for the base hull before we add all the extra additions. And I quite like it. It's a bit bland and it's a bit too uniform on the back. It's just one slope, really. But yeah, it really works in my opinion. I think it is absolutely fine. Boring, but fine. Now, of course, right now it's completely hollow. So what I'm going to do is start adding a metal section here at the back so we can figure out where the propulsion's going to be at least. The engine's probably going to go about here, next to the main bridge section, which will be basically where all this is, just a bit further back, probably. Then all the weapons and stuff will likely be in the next video. This took way too long since I kept on redoing everything. It's a really simple design, so you'd think I'll be able to do it in like 5 seconds. But no, it's me. So naturally, it took way too long. Well, this is going to be odd. That worked significantly better than I thought it would. Just add a basic metal flooring to this thing. Yeah, all of this needs to be... Oh, just look at the size difference between the old ship and the new one. That is insane. Obviously, there's going to be holes here and there. We'll patch those up, and we are going to continue to box everything in. Let's just continue to make it as close to finished as possible, at least in terms of the basic hull. So as soon as we start doing other stuff, we can get right to it. Will this thing need a keel? Potentially. It depends how much we're going to use it as a skimmer and how much we're going to use it as a normal ship / sub. If we're going to use it a lot as a skimmer, we can probably get away with just... Wow, this thing's big. With just something like a PID to help with its balance. If we want to use it more as a boat, still PID, but definitely a keel would be really, really helpful. I mean, we have loads of space and loads of area we can just mold to make it look better as well. To have a natural looking keel, we can also bring the edges down here. So what I'm thinking is potentially what we could do, takes so long to get from one side to the other, is go like this and then down and back out. Like that, and then continue that down, and then that could be the keel in the center. In fact, we could use all 3 of these as the keel. Oh, that's not a terrible idea. We could even hide lead in the center of them. That might be what we end up doing. I think the keel will go on last, similar to the bridge, after the weapons and all the internals have been added, so we know where the center of mass is, we know how bad the problem's going to be. If we start adding it now, we're just going to have to redo it over and over again. That's just not time I'd like to spend doing that. That was a weird way of saying that, because words are difficult. You know what I'm gonna do because I'm a weirdo? I'm gonna keep this internal hull here as it is. The only thing I'm gonna do is remove all the propulsion stuff, because that could start to really mess with our controls, and also it's gonna be completely useless. But I'm gonna keep this internal hull, because I still like the idea of it evolving and becoming different constantly. So I want the core still there. Again, we still have the original core in the very center. So we're going to have this just staying where it is. How much of a problem will this cause? Not as much as I first thought it would be, honestly. It's going to be annoying, but at the same time, it's not getting in the way of all this front section, all that back section. It's just here, so we can work around this, building our engines and using this for protection. So we just build this downwards. Then we can have the engine perhaps here, though right now it's right close to the bottom, which will make it very vulnerable to EMP surges and, well, any form of torpedo, really. So that's something to work with, but yeah, I'm going to keep this in the center, which right now looks kind of awesome in a way. It's like it's being suspended in like a different room. Yeah, this is still flooding. That's not exactly surprising. And the volume is too great. Well, once again, not exactly surprising. So for now, what I think I will do... Oh, that is creepy. Look at the red... Wait, is that red water or is just our lights? Just our lights, okay. We're turning the water red because, you know, we're normal like that. What I'll do now is box this off with a triple layer of metal, since I'm probably going to add a lot of things in there. We can always remove or add metal later, and add air pockets and stuff to make it HESH and heat resistant. Well, at least definitely heat resistant. I'm not sure if air pockets do help with HESH. They do, don't they? I'm almost certain they do, but now I'm second guessing myself. Do they, don't they? I normally know these things. I swear I normally know these things. Stress does weird things to the brain. There we are. Then we're going to do the same to the sides of the craft and do the same at the back as well. So we've got this chunk of armor all the way around that old hull. Remember, that does have the heartstone in and stuff, so extra protection won't hurt. Actually, what else I'm going to do is add a layer of metal to the outside of all of the hull. Because obviously we don't want wood being our only armor. At very minimum, we want that everywhere. That's going to massively increase the weight, but it will also show us where the center of mass is going to be most likely. That'll take a second or 10. Now, this is definitely making everything worse in terms of being hydrodynamic, aerodynamic, potato dynamic, but overall, it makes me more happy dynamic, so we are adding one more of these metal rings into the craft's hull. See, I call it a ring purely because it kind of looks like it's attached at the top like that. Almost like razor blades, actually, now I think about it. Ooh, now it looks way more horrible than I originally thought. But this is also blocking one of the problematic sections where this is a 3 in the middle of 4s when it comes to the slope, so it is blocking that completely. I really like it. I think it breaks up the hull and makes it look unique-ish, so I am going to keep those. I could remove them, honestly. It's not particularly difficult to do so, but I like them. After all, we don't want this to look too normal. That would be just, well, in a weird way, being normal would make this kind of weird. Up until this adventure, I hadn't really used lightweight alloy at all in any real builds, and I really do need to start using it more, because it's a really good bit of armor, honestly. Now, it's not as good as metal outright, but it's very different to metal in that it is very, very buoyant. In fact, it's more buoyant than wooden blocks, which is pretty impressive. So lightweight alloy is 300 health and 13 armor, whereas regular metal is 350 and 15. Its weight is 40, and the lightweight alloy's weight is only 5, which makes it even lighter than wood, by the way, just putting it out there. So it's only slightly less armor, only slightly less health, but the buoyancy is plus 32.6, whereas metal is minus 1.7, and wood is plus 27.7. I need to start using this more. Still think I'll use metal more than lightweight, but yeah, it's something to add later on. Okay, so this is basically the space I'm gonna have for the back section here. So this is where our engine is going to sit, a little bit elevated off the floor, probably with some armor there as well, and it's going to be, most likely, well, it could just be a fuel engine. There's the thing. As much as I keep on saying I want to use steam engines, we could just make a really, really efficient fuel engine. That wouldn't be horrendous. So let's have a look at some of the prefabs. So, essentially, I'm going to make something like this. As you can see, this thing is absolutely filled with turbochargers. I think they're turbochargers. Yep, they are turbochargers. Which means it should be very good in terms of fuel efficiency at high RPM. So let's just put down this example piece for a second. How much is this going to give me once I add some fuel? Let's try not to break the engine as soon as I put it down, please. I mean, that's 6,700 engine power right there. I still want to use RTGs, but I feel like a backup fuel engine, especially with how much space we have at the moment, this thing's going to be mostly hollow, because, well, if we go to advanced cannons, or one of the examples here, let's go with the Pearl, this thing here costs 43,000, and it's absolutely tiny. Look at how much space we have. We have nowhere near enough resource to make use for the entire space of this hull, but of course the point is, I don't want to keep on making more and more hulls, so I'm just building way too big, so I can add to it later, nice and easily. So yeah, I do think that perhaps a fuel engine might be better overall. Okay, you can go away. I could just go back to RTGs, but they're so expensive. 5,000 per one to only get 505 energy per second, and that's not exactly engine power, that's energy. That's how much our battery is filled. Which is converted into engine power, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, there we are. We have some pitch blades now added. That should make us a lot more stable looking. Can we please stop moving? The off button currently is not working properly when it comes to movement. There we go. This time it did, though. You know, just to prove me wrong, it worked this time. But as long as it works nonetheless. Okay, so next we need roll control. Then some more pitch control at the front, so it's on both sides. Then we need our turning capability. I've just added a huge Deady Blade to the back of the craft, which means we should be decently quick right now as our first mode of transport. The great thing with the Deady Blades is that they work regardless where you are, I think except for space, which would make sense. Though maybe it does work in space. I've never actually tested it, and sometimes real life physics versus game physics aren't exactly the same thing. I mean, to be fair, the blades are working in an enclosed environment somehow, so, you know. Really basic roll PID has been added, and it seems to do well even when there are waves about, which is nice. And it is a really basic PID, it's essentially just the default. The pitch is a bit more customized, but only by a bit. What else do we need? The ability to turn, and then just a quick test drive around to make sure we have movement capabilities back online, at least in the water. Then we need to move on and figure out how we're going to do the water skimming elements. Actually, we probably need the weapons first, so that we have a more finalized center of mass. Okay, time to test the basics. Now, turning is going to be a bit rocky at the moment. Our center of mass is way off from where I think it's going to be, so I've placed all the movement accordingly. I think it's going to end up, so yeah, that's pretty awful. Still, our max speed is almost respectable, at least for a ship of this size. Now, of course, we're going to be a lot heavier later, but we're also going to have more movement parts, so yeah, we can move, and we have minor turning capabilities. I might just add some internal blades, just to make our turning a bit smoother and a bit more effective. And although the roll does look horrendous even now, it's not as bad when you're not in first person. In fact, that's not even that bad. That's alright. And they're the things we're going to iron out later on. Anyway, okay, we continue forth. Very, very basic movement is now attained. Well, that was easier than expected. I've just added some hydrofoils to the core, which aren't responding to anything but manual controls. And it seems like we have the capability to turn into a very, very unstable sub. Mostly because currently all of our capabilities in terms of roll are jet-based. So, to make sure we're a sub, we do need more regular roll controls. As we become airborne briefly. Becoming airborne shouldn't be too difficult either. Just manual hydrofoils. That way, air flight and sub controls can be completely manual straight away, and that can be the basics. We can work on both as we see fit. Now, of course, what you really need to do to make this more stable is we need it to be able to flatten itself out after we enter the water. Which is actually really difficult to see if that's even happening right now because the water's not clear enough. And this is more of an escape mechanism anyway. Once again, I don't want the sub to be the main thing this thing can do. It should be on the water either as a boat or a water skimmer. At the moment, probably just a boat. I have set up a few things to try and make it stabilize underwater, and it seems like it does work if I give it a little bit of prompting to begin with. Yeah, I can hardly see what's going on here, so I need to make the water clear whilst I'm testing this out, which I can do in the graphics setting. But there we are. That should be, yeah, able to turn. Very poorly, but it can. But it can only descend at the moment by tipping its nose, which isn't Very graceful. Okay, stop. Let's get back to the surface, please. Now, ways we can fix this is we could have an internal Deady Blade somewhere in the center. This could act both as its flight capability and the way it can submerge. It would be more vulnerable to being hit because all the mechanics to make it sink is all the mechanics which makes it move. It's just using them in different ways, so it's actually very easy to do, despite the fact it's so obviously overly buoyant at the moment. Once we add the weapons and it's heavier, that's going to be easier. So I think I'm going to end the video here. We clearly have the shell now ready. There's a lot of armor on the inside already. We only have 183,000 resources left, so large advanced cannons are probably out of the question right now, along with lasers. Small advanced cannons or ideas for them very much on the table. Missile systems obviously on the table. We already still have the old versions, so don't worry, we haven't lost any weapons except for the harpoons. At the moment we have lost all melee capability. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that, so it's no longer melee capable at all, or if I'm going to bring it back in some way. That's all down to the comments I read and any ideas I have between now and the next video. I'm obviously very tired already, so thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed today's video, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. I have high hopes this is going to be just as weird as the original craft, after a bit of tinkering. Already, it can be a sub, and it can be a boat. Now it just needs everything else. Thank you so much for watching. I've been loving this series, even if today has been a bit more build-orientated. At most, only one more of those, and then we're back harvesting the enemy. I mean, if we use a fuel engine, we're gonna need to constantly feed, otherwise we're going to starve. And those enemies are so delicious.